Now, without further ado, let's welcome our first guest of the day. We have Cliff Tironi with us. Cliff Tironi is a managing partner of Thin Air and is a co-creator of the real-time feedback platform used as a core tool utilized in driving their digital transformation consulting. Cliff has a passion for data visualization as a method to uncover deeper meaning and powerful insights. Cliff, very excited to have you here with us and very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Jose. I appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
Looks
okay.
Good.
Fantastic. Thank you. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining this morning. And Jose, thank you for your partnership, and that was a fantastic introduction. It sounds like a really, really exciting day. So I'm excited to kick things off here with a presentation around the art of data in digital transformation. And we're going to be talking about how you can use data visualization as a method to uncover hidden problems and as a result create innovative solutions to complex challenges. So I'm pretty excited. A little bit about who we are, and then we'll dig right into the content. So this is an example of a visualization that we created recently for a Fortune 100 consumer packaged goods company. I'm not going to dive into all of this, but the point here is that you can use visualizations. You know, we often think of them as a deliverable. You can also use them as a method. And so here what you're seeing, without unpacking all of this, we helped this firm to deconstruct and repackage their entire stage gate process. And these are a bunch of visualizations that were created to help craft that story. What we're going to be covering later on this morning in just a few minutes here is how this actually applies to healthcare. And I'm going to walk you through step by step how you can use some of these frameworks and tools in your own practices. Jose already introduced me. I appreciate the warm introduction. I am a self-proclaimed data geek at heart. I have a background in data visualization, and I very much enjoy how data visualization can be used as a powerful method to uncover business problems. Thin Air, the company, we have a range of solutions. We have IoT sensors that can measure just about anything. They can be tagged on your most important equipment, like machinery, and then we also have a real-time feedback platform. And so the combination of the IoT sensors with human-based feedback gives a complete 360-degree view of a company's operations, and we then wrap that all up with some high-powered analytics and change management consulting. So this here is an example of how this might actually work in your facility. I know many people here are in healthcare, where in number one there, you're seeing this patient was first had an infection in room 108B. And I know that we're all really trying to address the challenges associated with COVID and contact tracing. And so here, imagine a patient did have an infection. In step two, you see the physician is recognizing that there's a need for cleaning and disinfection, and that has to be a priority. And so she's using the real-time feedback platform to collect feedback from the team on ways that processes and operations can actually be improved to address it. In the upper right-hand side there in step three, you could see that this cart was moved from room 108B where that infected patient was. So that's where you could use sensors and track your assets and see where they've moved from and to. And then in step four, this administrator clearly sees that there's issues around disinfection. People are returning devices, assuming they've been disinfected when in fact they haven't. In step five on the left, this is where the analytics comes in, and having the ability to have that insight into your operations and decreasing risks of healthcare associated infections, HAIs. And here we're seeing that the equipment was actually moved from one room to the other and therefore requires disinfection. And then in step 6 and 7, real-time alerts are going out about proper hand hygiene practices and sanitation stations needing to be refilled. So this is sort of a landscape of how you can think about some of the components of machine and human-based feedback in digital transformation. Who you are a mix of business professionals. Some of you are in healthcare and some of you aren't. It's a global audience. And so my commitment to you coming out of this session is that whether you're in the very beginning stages of your digital transformation journey, whether you're towards the end, whether you're a novice in data visualization or an expert, that each and every one of you is going to get something out of the next 25, 30 minutes. So that's my commitment to you. This was created specifically with you in mind. And we're going to have some fun doing this. We're going to go over a framework of a conceptual hierarchy. We're then going to talk about redefining the business problems. Specifically, then we're going to walk through how this is applied to help a large medical provider with a really sticky problem around patient throughput. We're then going to show how that applies to your own digital transformation journey, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A portion, and I'll take any questions from the audience. So let's dive into the content here. This is a framework, and when you think about visualizing data, really what you're doing is encoding information, right? You're taking it from one form and you're converting it into another form. One framework that you can use to think about this is this conceptual hierarchy here. Every concept that has existed, that does exist, that will exist, exists on this continuum of either being very, very concrete or very, very abstract. And the degree to which that concept falls on this continuum is contingent upon how immediately removed it is from your immediate span of view. So, for example, if I say the word chair, which is a really concrete concept, you get what's called an immediate perceptual referent, which is really just a fancy way of saying, you know what a chair looks like. And so you may not have thought of this chair in particular, the one that I'm showing on my screen. You may have thought of one that has metal backing, or maybe a different seat color rather than vanilla, maybe it was gray. But you know what a chair looks like. And so when I said that concept, you get an image of that. It comes pretty quickly to mind. Now, if we go up that hierarchy and I say something much more abstract, like furniture, the range of possible inputs starts to expand infinitely in your mind. And so you start thinking of things like tables and sofas and chairs and plants. And so the ambiguity and the room for interpretation increases the more abstract that we get on that conceptual hierarchy continuum. And this has dramatic implications for when you apply this to things like patient throughput analysis or contact tracing. And so we're going to break that down in just a minute. Let me give you another example. If I say the word kiss, you may have thought of kissing a loved one, a spouse, or a son or a daughter this morning before hopping on today's sessions. If you're a music fan, perhaps you thought of the rock band. And if you're a chocolate fan, you might have even thought of the tasty treats. If we go up the continuum and I say the word love, the range of possible inputs starts to expand infinitely. And again, there's way more that we would be able to show here in just a few minutes when we think of what does love actually mean visually and how would we encode that. So when we encode information, and similarly with data visualization, we're doing so taking concepts and then converting them using symbols, shapes, and colors. And you can use that hierarchy as one framework, which we'll go over how we actually apply that to a patient throughput analysis in just a minute. Before I dive into that, the other core piece of this is truly understanding your business problems. And that's at the heart of everything, right? Because you can create a very innovative solution, but to a problem that was defined inaccurately, that solution is expensive and futile and it doesn't make sense and you just spend a lot of time and money on it. I'm going to give you a very, very fun sort of basic example of how in our everyday lives, we are, all as humans are confronted with having to not only define but redefine problems in everyday interactions that we have. We're then going to take that concept and then apply that to this patient throughput analysis. And so the everyday example that I have for you is about Chipino, my cat. For years, my wife and I fought over getting a cat, and I was always a dog person, and I never wanted a cat, and we fought and fought and fought. And one day, after we got married, my wife goes to the shelter to get a rescue kitten. And she sends me this text message and she says, hey, I'm at the shelter getting us a kitten. And I write back, are you serious? And she writes back, she thinks she's funny. Yeah, here she says, seriously, Fuzzy, yes, I'm serious. And so my blood pressure starts to increase. I start getting upset and I write her this long text message back saying, I can't believe this, you know, I'm so upset. If you get this cat, you're gonna have to feed it, clean it, take it to the vet, right? All these things. I'm so mad right now. She writes back a photo with the contract signed and the cat, Chipino, is coming home. So I go to blow off some steam. I go out for a drink with my buddy, and I come back, and within about 15 minutes after seeing this little guy, my heart melts. And so before I know it, I start cooking food for Chipino. I'm cooking him chicken. We're hanging out. We're becoming best friends. And wouldn't you know it, Chipino even enjoys reading about data visualization. So here he and I are learning up on aspect ratios for properly designed data visualizations. So why am I telling you this story? Because one night, this is a few years ago, I was having bad back problems and my back was spazzing, and we get this 60-pound bag of litter that's delivered to our apartment. And my wife was nagging me to change Chipino's litter. And so I was like, no, I can't, you know, my back hurts, I don't want to spill litter everywhere. And I started rattling off all these different problems. And she stops and she says, none of those are the problem. She goes, the real problem is getting litter in the litter pan. And so she walks over to the kitchen. She goes to the cupboard and she pulls out one of those to-go containers that you get from from a restaurant. She walks over to the 60-pound bag of litter and plops it in. And she goes, there, problem solved. And I stopped dead in my tracks and I thought, you know what? She's right. The problem wasn't that I was going to hurt my back. The problem wasn't that litter was going to spill everywhere. The problem was getting litter in the litter pan. And so my wife then came up with a creative solution to an everyday problem. But I thought that was a really great example of how in our everyday lives we are confronted with thinking about things as problems, and then we create what we think are solutions around those problems, where as we really have to take a step back, redefine that, and then the solutions that we create not only are more creative, but sometimes they actually work far better. And they do work better because you've defined your problem accurately. So I want to now take that same, I hope you enjoy that story. I now want to apply that same concept here to a large health system that we help them to redefine their problem. And then we're going to go back to that conceptual hierarchy as well. So this was a patient throughput analysis. And the executives at this particular facility, they were convinced that they had a space problem. And so they wanted to knock down all these different walls. They had patients that were getting lost. They had equipment out in the hallways. And they said, we want to knock down that wall, that wall, that wall. We have a space problem. And so we said, okay, you know, we'll take a look at the data. We'll collect some information. We'll do interviews, and we'll use our approach to how we might solve this highly abstract concept of a patient throughput analysis for this large medical system. And so the first analysis that we did was we wanted to take a look at the spread of physicians' schedules. And so here you're seeing gray bars, and those gray bars represent the spread of one physician's schedule for this particular week. And so physicians were scheduled to see patients in 4-hour chunks. You could either see patients between 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. or between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. And so at first I said, you know what, I don't care when they saw them. I just want to know what was the spread of when each physician saw their first patient and when they saw their last patient, not accounting for in this visual all the individual appointments in between, to look at some of their space. And so we found that on average, physicians were seeing patients over a 2.5-hour time period. So out of a 4-hour allotment, that meant they had about an hour and a half of unoptimized space and time. And we thought, okay, maybe there's something there. Let's dig a little bit deeper. And so I next then visualized in Excel what this would look like if this facility were operating at max capacity. And so this is a visual rendering of what it would look like if they were operating at max capacity, where you would have a provider, right, a physician, and every physician was assigned to 2 different rooms. And so ideally what would happen is a physician would come in, see their first patient in the morning. Meanwhile, a second patient was going through check-in and triage, and then making their way to the room across the hall. And me as the physician, I would literally go back and forth, whether I was seeing new patients or returning patients, because they were scheduled either in 20 or 40-minute blocks, back to back to back all day, as would my 8 other colleagues across these 16 visitation rooms. And so this is what would happen if they were operating at max capacity. In reality, we found this. Look at all this craziness that's going on here. There was tons of unnecessary white space. There was double and triple bookings, and it literally was just chaos every day of the week. You're only seeing this for one day. And so we thought, all right, maybe there's something there. Let's dig down even further. And so we next wanted to visualize what it looked like as patients move through this process. And so I took the blueprint of the facility, embedded it in Excel, and then here you're seeing 7:40 in the morning, and you're seeing a room that's highlighted, and that represents a patient being seen. And so as I start to scroll over for different time slots, you're literally going to see patients start to move through, and you're going to see the double bookings, the triple bookings, and that's for not just Monday, that's for Tuesday, right? Every day of the week, it's the same exact data I presented before, it's just visually expressed a little bit differently. And so when we presented this to the executives, they had their own light bulb moment, and they said, oh my gosh, we don't have a space problem, we have a scheduling problem. And we said, exactly right. And so we then gave them solutions around their scheduling, not around their space, and they saved a lot of money with not having to tear down walls. And we focused more so on the business operations side of things, not on deconstructing the actual physical space of the environment. And so going back to this whole notion of the conceptual hierarchy before, one of the things that you can do in your job is feel completely free to present the same data, but through different forms, it could be very effective. The other thing, going back to our hierarchy of abstract and concrete, is I could have walked in, and when we delivered the findings to the executives, I could have said, all right, your room utilization is 65%. And we tend to think of numbers as being really, really concrete, but in reality, they're really abstract because they represent something. And in this case, it represents behavior. And so I liken that to the water cycle, where on the water cycle, it's almost like water vapor. It's really hard to see, it's really hard to feel that, it's really hard to visualize. And so we started breaking it down hierarchically. The next level down was when we showed them the gray bars, and that was like water beads forming. The next level down from that was showing them the blue bricks of the schedule, and that's like actual water. And then even more concretely, we showed them what it looked like as patients move through, and that's like ice. The next level down would be for me to take my phone or some recording equipment and record patients for 8 hours as they're moving through this process. One, that's a little creepy. Two, that's impossible to go and then discern any kind of pattern from and then present, right? No one's going to sit down and watch 8 hours of you following patients around. You have to visually encode it. And so what we did was we started on this continuum concrete, and we went all the way through to walk the executives through to redefine this problem for them. The other key piece of this is that you can use data visualization to create empathy and to understand the human context. Now, we often think of data as being like cold and ruthless, but you actually can use it as a powerful way to create empathy. And for us, when we walked in to deliver the findings for this presentation, we knew that the stakeholders in the room were a mix of them. And so it was executives, it was scheduling staff, it was nursing staff, and there were about 25 or so people in the room. Now, whenever people hire consultants with technology like us to come in, they're tend to sometimes be a little bit on edge because they don't know always what the findings, or if they're fearful for getting their wrist slapped or losing their jobs, right? This wasn't the case at all, but we recognize that, and we create a lot of empathy and when we deliver content. And so we wanted to neutralize any feelings whatsoever of negative sentiment. And without even showing the first piece of data, we wanted to show what it looks like as patients move through this process to create that common sense of empathy throughout the room. And so here, this is the same blueprint that I showed you before. We put in one slide in PowerPoint, and as I advance the slide, you're going to see that we want to show that a patient walks in, they have to check in, and when they check in, they interact with the scheduling staff, they have to fill out some forms, they then move through and go to the waiting room, right? After they go to the waiting room, they, for a period of time, they then are triaged and they interact with the nursing staff, right? And we literally walked the people through to remind them that this is more than just a scheduling problem. Let's look at it in terms of every step of the sequence that a patient goes through your facility on a day-to-day basis. And so this was a great way to sort of set the stage and remind people, and also that this isn't just a scheduling problem, this is a human problem. And looking at these components in context visually is really, really helpful. And by the way, this was done using just one slide in PowerPoint. So this is how you can use tools in your everyday that you have access to every day in really creative ways, as opposed to doing like a bunch of bullet points. So just think of the power of how you can use data visualization and with everyday tools to do this type of analysis, just like we did. And just remember to accurately define your problem, show data through a variety of lenses, and create empathy. And don't always assume that your audience, whether you're an internal or an external to a client, has defined their problem accurately. Don't use just abstract numbers, show it visually as much as you can. And of course, don't be emotionally removed from your stakeholders. Immerse yourself in what they're thinking and then present that. The last example that I want to give you here is, and then we're going to go over to giving you a strategy and a framework for how you can use digital transformation at your companies. This is a really powerful example of data visualization that in World War II, researchers at the Center for Naval Analysis were confronted with a really difficult problem, because these bomber planes, United States bomber planes, were returning and they had all these bullet holes in them from trying to be shot down during the war. And so the researchers created, right, decades ago, created a blueprint of where the bombers that had returned were getting shot the most. And this is showing you a visualization of that. And so the researchers thought, oh man, okay, we can see that the majority of planes are being shot in the body and the wings. Let's now go reinforce those areas and get a whole bunch of metal and armor and reinforce those. And it wasn't until a Hungarian statistician, Abraham Wald, actually inverted that and redefined the problem. And he said, you know what, this is not the problem at all, because what you're capturing are records of the planes that returned. The ones that got shot down, right, is the absence of data right now. And so the ones that got shot down, they were most vulnerable in the cockpit and parts of the tail and the engine. And so Abraham had redefined that problem and said, let's not go after that which is being shot and returned. We have to go after the missing data, which is that the engine and the cockpit and parts of the tail. And so we always think of digital transformation and everyone gets excited about what you can do with data. Sometimes it's the data that you don't have is just as important and valuable as the data that you do have. And so we use this a lot when we do engagements with our clients, using this framework here, this digital transformation solution. Going back to the example that I showed you at the beginning of this presentation on the consumer packaged goods company, when you think about engaging your stakeholders and whatever initiative that you're embarking on, that many times clients will try to capture feedback from associates in terms of how the initiative is performing. And they use a whole variety of tools, from point-in-time surveys all the way through to something that we have, which is much more continuous and easy to use, a real-time feedback solution. And when you're engaging your stakeholders and collecting their feedback, that sometimes it's, of course, you get feedback from engaged people, but sometimes it's the absence of. It's the people you don't hear from are sometimes your most vulnerable populations that you want to target and bring along with that change. So I share that as an example here. You know, many of you are steeped in digital transformation day to day, and others of you may not be. When we think of it, you know, fundamentally what it is, it's a change in how you deliver value to your stakeholders. And for those of you that are steeped in it day to day, I'm sure you can empathize with this, that some cases digital transformation efforts fail. And it's been well researched and documented that a lot of times the reason why digital transformations fail is because people don't view it beyond just technology. They think it's a silver bullet, right? You also have to capture, and it's a process that expands far beyond just technology. And you have to actually bring people along with behavior change, with mindset change and processes and looking at things whole to whole. And so one of the frameworks that we use are building our solutions for our clients around these three core building blocks. People competencies, which is developing the people, giving them the training and the development that they need to succeed. The second is process and looking at things end to end, right? Just like with the patient throughput, not looking at a scheduling problem as something narrow, but rather contextualizing it across a whole range of dependencies. And then thirdly, systems capabilities, really being able to connect and integrate your systems together. And then, of course, there's two organizational dynamics. There's continuous feedback, which we've been talking a little bit about here, and how you can use the power of different tools to collect that ongoing feedback from your employees, from your clients to help improve processes. And then data-driven change. And this is using things like I had mentioned earlier, IoT sensors on your equipment, even on staff, and the combination of data that you get from machine-generated IoT sensors combined with human-based feedback is a very, very true 360-degree view of your operations. And so think of those dynamics as you are continuing down your own digital transformation solution journey. And so these are some of the questions that we ask ourselves, and that I think it might be helpful for you in the audience to consider yourselves is, how can you better understand and connect your own assets, your machinery, your equipment, using things like sensors to maximize their performance? And on the people side, how can you collect and organize that feedback from hundreds or even thousands of your stakeholders? And then imagine the power if you could combine those two things together. How would it help you address a critical challenge that you have? And what might be some new approaches that you would want to take to solving some of the complex challenges that you're confronting? So as you think through some of those questions here, I do want to, and Jose, I'm going to ask you to post a link in the chat. We do have this framework that we use. It's a free online resource. Feel free to use it. I'm going to flick over and show you what it looks like here. But the benefits of you actually going through and filling this out, it only take a minute or two, is that you will get your own copy of your own digital transformation solution worksheet, and it'll walk you through step by step some of the pieces that we're talking about here. You also get access to a copy of your own digital transformation solution white paper, which has really great framework strategy and then also tools that you can use to advance your own digital transformation solutions. And then lastly, you'll get a consultative call. I'm happy to sit down, talk with you, brainstorm, virtually whiteboard out ideas. It doesn't have to be long. It could be a quick call. And so the solution, let me pop over, is a web-based one. And you can see it gives some context for it. And it literally walks you through step by step how you can use these different elements in your own company, starting with people competencies. And so you can click in this box and say, these are our competencies, right? You can fill those out. Next, you'll then walk you through the systems capabilities, and it'll give you the step-by-step process here Again, it only takes a few minutes to complete, and this is something that I think you could use to apply in your own companies as you're, like I said, as you're embarking on your own digital transformation solutions. And so I hope you enjoyed that. We are a feedback company, and so I'm going to ask Jose to also post a link in the chat where you can give me personal feedback on what you valued or didn't value with this presentation. Happy to connect with you afterwards. Here's the URL. You don't need to sign in or anything like that. And then I'm happy to open this up. I know we're a few minutes under here, but happy to open this up to questions and answers.
Excellent, Cliff. Excellent. I'm pasting the feedback on the chat now so that everybody can have access to that. And great presentation. Let me. There we go. We have it. Now we have both links on the chat as Cliff mentioned. Awesome presentation. I love the way that you look at the fact that there are a couple of things that are interesting there, and there's commentary throughout, and I'm going to start picking up some of the questions that came up. But you look at the perspective of what data can show us, but also by shifting perspectives on the data, what questions can emerge from those new perspectives, and sometimes those questions can be very meaningful and very interesting. And as you said, in not only defining the problem that we thought we had, but redefining that problem. The essence of innovation, as a matter of fact, is the ability to redefine a problem through different lenses. And that you had some wonderful examples of that. So the first question, and for the audience, go ahead, we have time, type your questions for Cliff in real time, and I'm gonna pass to Cliff as many as we can during this time. The first one comes from William Fuller, and William asks that the open visualization seems to have lots of information in order to absorb it to absorb it at a glance. Oh, my screen just shifted as I was reading that. In order to absorb it as in a glance, what size of monitor and or printed page size is recommended? So it just kind of a very specific question here related to how, when you present this type of information, the visual spatial style that you presented. Is there a recommended page size or monitor size that you recommend for that?
Yeah, thanks for that question, William. In many cases, the answer is always it depends, right? Now, if you recall, William, it's a very good question though, that in the beginning part of the presentation, I showed that big visual with all the different elements on it. The reason why we had presented that was because that was actually printed on a 9-foot high by 13-foot wide piece of paper. Now, because we were going to present live when we could all get together in person, right? However, we knew we wanted that to have life beyond just that physical space for that one-day presentation. And so we digitally then chunked up each component and put it as its own separate image on a separate slide in PowerPoint. So that's one way, William, that you could show sort of overall macro in print, but then you could also chunk it up and walk people through a really complex series of visuals step by step so that it's not overwhelming.
Very good, very good. Another question has to do with if you can unpack a little bit more on when you go into a new setting and following some of the principles that you just discussed on visualization. What are some of the kind of basic steps that you take to start visualizing an area, to start visualizing a process? If you can just kind of at a higher level, just those general steps that you take to do what you have just showed us, some great examples here. How do you approach new situations with those lenses?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one of the best tools that you can use is to take out a blank piece of, I don't have one here at my desk, a blank piece of paper and a pen, and just start sketching out some ideas. And it can be harebrained. And look, I'm a horrible drawer. I can barely draw stick figures. But what you do, and I do this all the time, is when I'm about to present something or create something, is I will take out a piece of paper, sketch out ideas, spend 30 minutes. And what I'm doing is, in effect, rapid prototyping, right? Just like you would if you're in architecture and you do a 3D rendering of a home, or if you're in technology like we are and we do wireframes before we build out different functions. In data visualization, you can use a piece of paper and a pen, sketch out different ideas, and in many cases, go to your stakeholders and walk them through the content and say, hey, does this make sense? How does this look? And you know, I do that a lot with our clients, where I'll sketch out different ideas, get their input, and they say, you know what, we like this one over here, we don't like that one there, can you move this over here? Oh, you know what, we're gonna have this executive in the audience, I think we should make the story really about this element. And so you then come up with this rapid prototype that you can then go and build in any tool that you want. And I could show you things that you can do in Excel and PowerPoint that, you know, hopefully would blow your mind, that what I call low-tech visualization. But you, in effect, have saved yourself a ton of time by crafting your narrative and your story first, getting your stakeholder buy-in, and then you go and then build it, and you're going to save yourself a ton of time, and it'll be that much more effective, I guarantee it.
Powerful, powerful things. The next question here is from Cameron Janhan Shahi, and Cameron, who is a leader in this area of improvement and innovation across industries. He has been with our conferences for a number of events. He has presented in one of them, and he says, "Great presentation, and I am glad that you worked out your relationship with your cat." Could you talk a little bit about how you manage the implementation of the solutions you identify and how you help your clients scale the digital solutions with that?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Cameron. And I thought you were going to say you were glad that I worked out the relationship with my wife, which I was, you know, upset about that she got the cat.
Well, we noticed that the apartment is pretty empty, so we figure you're by yourself without a cat and wife.
Well, we won't go there, but yeah, right. So Cameron, it's a great question. And, you know, in this part, in the case of what you saw here, we had a combination of people on our team. We had boots on the ground. We had project managers. When we go to scale this, this type of thinking and this solution, I mean, there's a number of ways that we could do it. One, for example, going back to the consumer packaged goods company, this is a Fortune 100 multi-global, multi-billion-dollar company where we help them to deconstruct and repackage their go-to-market innovation pipeline. Collecting the ongoing input and feedback from their associates was key to the process as one element of it, right? I could talk half day about this project in particular. But engaging stakeholders in a meaningful way, once you have that input and using analytics, we can then craft strategic communications to target different stakeholders across the organization to really hit on what themes are most important to them as part of this initiative. So that's second. Third is then upskilling, right? That the most important component of digital transformation is the people. And so not only us going in and directly training, but identifying a core group of influential stakeholders where we help them become the trainers. And it's a train the trainer model where they have to become influential without direct authority. And so throughout this whole process, we're constantly measuring and iterating and collecting feedback at every stage. I think that the combination of those three things, of real-time feedback, of strategic communications, and then of a comprehensive training and a way to continuously measure and monitor that, are some of the keys to success that we like to, that are some of the principles that we abide by when we engage in large enterprise-wide initiatives such as this.
Very interesting, very interesting. Satyen Harvey makes a comment here. First, excellent storytelling approach of addressing the problem with the physician facility. Thanks for sharing that. And then he says that there are a couple questions that he asked. I'll pick one of them. In the example that you showed, of course, is related to the scheduling and the facility space itself. He was curious about patient experience and customer experience in that context. Patient experience. Was there anything as part of that work that that made you look at the patient experience to improve their experience and enhance this transformation? Not just from the scheduling or physical space perspective, but you know, as you look into that, you develop a greater empathy perhaps for what the patients go through, and if there was opportunities there to enhance their experience.
Yeah, thanks for that, and great question. And yeah, absolutely. So the interviews that we conducted and the data that we collected, I was showing you really just one small snippet in the small amount of time that we have here. But we did do extensive qualitative interviews with patients, and then use that as part of the more robust quantitative data that we were collecting on the different elements. And there were some specific recommendations that we were able to make and actually help our client execute on to improve the patient experience. One of them that had a trickle-down effect was that visualization that I showed you of the patients moving through the process. One of the great things was that this had life beyond the engagement with us, because now it became a training resource and manual that the other nurses and scheduling staff could use and circulate as they onboarded new nurses to show patients what they have to complete. And so the trickle-down effect helped patients experience a much more streamlined process, not only after we presented this, but then extending beyond the engagement, because they had that document in perpetuity to use.
Very good, Cliff. William Fuller has another question here related to the approach for visualization, and how do you determine that the presentation is better served in 2 visualizations than one more compacted visualization? And I think there's a bit of an art and a science to what you have shown here. Just kind of, and I'll add to his question, and kind of what is it? What is the process that you follow when you're creating these visualizations and you're deciding what is the best way of sharing this visualization with others? Describe a little bit of the process that goes on in your mind as you are identifying and then deciding how to share these visualizations.
Yeah, sure. So William, there's some really great resources. I don't have here on the chat feature, but that speak to the level of granularity that you want to present to. And you could almost think of it like a matrix, right? And so you can have really, really high level content or super, super detailed granular on one axis. And on the other axis, you have your range of stakeholders. You have executives, you have line managers, you have operations staff. And so one tool that you could use to even think about, depending on who you're presenting to, what level of granularity they need and the stakeholder needs. In many cases, this is a general generalization. Executives want just more of the high numbers, the facts, the quick, whereas the operational managers who are in the day-to-day, and if you have to build credibility with them, if you present too high level of content, they may not trust your content, right? And so you want to give them the sort of the Goldilocks, just the right amount. And then if they start asking questions, you can drill down, or you have reference tables or other materials that you can show even more granular information in terms of your methodology. But keeping that Goldilocks in mindset, where it's not too hot, not too cold, just right for your different range of stakeholders, you can think of it in terms of granularity, in terms of high level or abstract, or really, really, concrete.
Very good. Another concept that has emerged here is the concept of innovation through simplification. You can create visualizations, and visualizations can show a lot, but also they can become complex to follow sometimes. If there's, to your point, depending on the level of detail that you have on the visualization. And if you think about these concepts of the essence of perfection, perfection is only attained not when you keep adding details, but when there's nothing left to take out, so that you can communicate the essence of what you're doing. Curious about that, maybe a bit of a Kaizen approach to visualization and presentations. Do you go through that process when you create a visualization and then you start actually not thinking about adding things to it, but what do I remove so that the message that I'm communicating is very clear. How does that decision making on those presentations happens in your own mind?
Yeah, no, I love it. One of my favorite quotes, they attribute it to a number of people like Mark Twain and a few others, is if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it goes to say that it's easy to write like a really long email or a really long letter. It's really hard to refine that and prune it down to its core essence. And that same notion applies to data visualization, where it's easy to put a bunch of charts up and stuff up there. It's really hard to refine that and whittle that down. And so as we go in with our clients and we help them build their own muscle, these are some of the practices that we help them to build as they are managing their own digital transformation solutions, because they're going to be collecting an influx of continuous data. And so these are some of the techniques that we're able to go in. And in some cases, going back to the low-tech visualization, I could show you how you could draw circles and lines in PowerPoint, and it makes it look like it's, came out of The Economist or The Guardian or journalistic level grade material in really, really fast, easy ways. And so there's frameworks that we help, but then also the tools in terms of how you actually implement it.
Very good. Cliff, I understand from your other presentations the breadth and the depth of the coverage that you and your organization have, and this is a fascinating new view of the work that you do. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. A quick follow-up with you here. What is the best way for those who want to contact you, want to learn more about this? What is the best way of reaching you?
Yeah, sure. So the best way is I just shared my screen, my email. Just shoot me an email. It's cliff.tironi@thinair.io. And just shoot me an email. Happy to connect with you offline. And would love to engage with you and hear how you're doing with your own digital transformation solutions.
Perfect. Cliff, thank you very much for taking the time, sharing this very insightful view of visualization applied to healthcare. And I love the innovation for simplification approach. We can talk about, very complex data visualizations, and then how you work our robotic process automation on top of that. And the example that you provided was so strong because it can show that you can end up automating things that are not really necessary. And so very holistic view of improvements and innovations in healthcare. And thanks for taking the time to share your expertise with our global audience today.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you, Jose, for your partnership, and thank you everyone for the great questions. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, great first session with Cliff Tironi. We're gonna follow that up at the top of the hour with Dr. Karen Tilstra. Dr. Karen Tilstra will discuss her work with Advent Health on creating innovation labs that can ignite innovative thinking in healthcare organizations. She's going to talk about 5 critical factors for scaling innovation in healthcare. So her presentation starts at the top of the hour, and we'll take a break now, and we'll see you at the top of the hour. Thank you, everyone.